Hello again. As viewers are probably aware, a recent week saw the arrival of another 1,000 illegal immigrants to England who travelled across the English Channel in small boats. These people alone, who arrived in the course of just 7 days, would fill twice over the famous barge in Dorset, which is being touted as a possible solution to the use of hotels for holding refugees and asylum seekers. There are now 40,000 or so of these people in hotels, and last year the government managed to deport just a couple of hundred. With 1,000 a week now arriving, it is obvious that drastic action is required. The problem is that nobody wishes to speak plainly about what can actually be done, and I find this bizarre and disturbing that people are engaged in a kind of Alice in Wonderland debate, and they talk about Rwanda or RAF bases, cruise ships, when everybody knows perfectly well that this is tinkering with a problem which is getting worse month by month. No one will actually speak about the genuine solutions to the problem. There's talk of using old RAF bases or cruise ships rather than hotels, but these would be filled in the next couple of weeks by new arrivals. Nothing is deterring people from crossing the Channel in this way. I will outline the only two possible ways of tackling this crisis, and I do not like or approve of either. I am rather saying that these are the only ways of handling the situation. The first would mean declaring an amnesty for illegal immigrants already in the country and accepting that we shall see a continuing flood of such people into Britain. We would need to embark upon a massive building programme of new homes to house those who have come here and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. We are talking here of perhaps 40 or 50,000 new homes each year, specifically designated for illegal immigrants. This will both empty the hotels and prevent the private rental market and social housing market being overwhelmed. The result of such a policy would of course be to stimulate the flow of refugees and asylum seekers across the Channel. The alternative would be setting up a network of camps of the kind which were used during the First and Second World Wars to detain enemy aliens. These would be barbed wire enclosures with Spartan accommodation and basic food, perhaps of the same standard as school dinners. Those detained would have the option of agreeing to leave the country and being facilitated in their travel from the UK, or they could instead choose to remain in the camp. There is no doubt that such a system is feasible. We managed it well enough in the past. These places would, in effect, be concentration camps where we gathered together all the illegal immigrants and kept them under lock and key. The thumbnail to this video shows just such an establishment on the Isle of Man during the last war. Boarding houses were commandeered and barbed wire fences built around them, and then any stray Germans, other refugees, Austrians, British fascists and so on were simply sent to those boarding houses surrounded by the barbed wire, and they were kept under lock and key for as long as necessary. It can be done. It could be done easily enough. The effect of this policy would be to halt the flow of illegal immigrants across the Channel, as it would be obvious that the game was not worth it any longer. Once we embarked upon such a course of action, though, it would change British society forever in various ways. For one thing, the government would have to ignore the courts both in this country and abroad, and the whole thing would then be technically illegal both under international law and British domestic law. Perhaps an enabling act could be passed, but challenges from the courts would have to be ignored. Once a government starts ignoring the courts and ruling by decree, though, it would mean the end of the rule of law in this country, and Britain would cease to be a liberal democracy. I realise only too well that some malevolent fools will claim that I am advocating the setting up of concentration camps in this country for foreigners. I am not. I am saying that it is probably the only way of deterring people from crossing the English Channel in small boats, as well as being the only practical method of clearing the existing backlog of claims for asylum. Others will no doubt accuse me of arguing in favour of an amnesty for illegal immigrants and an open invitation for the future for everybody to rush into this country via the Channel. I'm not doing that either. I'm saying that this is the only practical alternative to the setting up of camps which I have spoken. These people will need homes, and so we must build them houses and flats. All I'm doing here is talking about things that nobody else wishes to speak of out loud. We know that the current situation cannot carry on, and that we are running out of hotels to house all the tens of thousands who are already here, to say nothing of the 50 or 100,000 likely to arrive in the coming year. There are not enough old RAF bases or disused cruise ships or holiday camps to house them all. If we try and put them in private rented accommodation, as is now being done, it will create a shocking crisis for people in this country who are already finding it difficult to find somewhere to live. The rental market is already collapsing. Obviously, we would need to build at least 100,000 new homes just for asylum seekers if we wished to deal sensibly with this situation by having an amnesty. These then are the only realistic courses of action. I am not in favour of either of them, but I am very much afraid that within the next year or so we shall have to make a choice between two hideous alternatives.